I'm now going to move to the next section of this event. I would like to welcome to the floor Vinciane Patelou, who will offer a short speech and a presentation, and then we'll have a round of questions concerning the EU Green Deal and other strategies and its relation to sustainable food production systems. So a quick introduction for Vinciane. So she heads up the Secretariat of ENSA, that's the European Plant-Based Foods Association in Brussels. And so I will pass the floor to you now, Vinciane, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Natasha, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about the opportunities for organic plant-based from the perspective of plant-based foods manufacturers. So let me share my screen and the presentation. There we go. Full screen. Can you all see it? Perfect.
Yes, we can see it. It looks good.
All right, so about ENSA, let me say a few words about who we are as an association. As you can see, the acronym doesn't correspond to the name of the association anymore, because it used to be the Soy Foods Association. But as the market has evolved, so when the association was created more than 15 years ago, the market was mainly about soy foods, but the market has evolved, and now plant-based foods are made from a wider variety of crops. And so as the market has evolved, so as the association, and now we are representing the entire spectrum of plant-based foods. Our members today, 10 companies, as you can see from various countries in the EU, most of the market leaders in plant-based. What we are talking about, and as you can see from the products that these companies are manufacturing, it's alternatives to dairy products, so drinks, alternatives to yogurt, spreads, this kind of products that are alternative for everything dairy. And then you have the meat alternatives. And some of our members are exclusively in the dairy alternatives, some of our members are exclusively in the meat alternatives, some are in both spaces. And that's the variety of the plant-based sector, also using different crops again in the products. Talking about organic, we have some of our members that are fully in organic. That would be the case of Ecotone, which used to be Visanen. That's also the case of Liquats in Spain, and we have other members that are half in conventional, half in organic, or in varying proportion. So for instance, Alpro, you may know the brand Provemel. Our French member Tribala also has the brand Sojasun in France, in conventional, Sojad in organic. So what do these companies represent? The plant-based sector is on the rise. So if you look at the membership of ENSA, our members have an aggregated turnover of 1.8 billion euro last year. And that represents about half of the market, I would say, if you take into account the non-members of ENSA, the private labels, and so on. So quite a significant market. This being said, it's still quite small compared to the reference market. So if you look at the dairy alternative, it's about 6% of the dairy market. And when we're talking about meat alternative, it's less than 1% of the meat market. So still a lot of consumers that need to learn about the products, need to try them and incorporate them in their diets. But what we're seeing is an interest from consumers to incorporate more of these products in their diet and to try them. And that leads analysts, and these figures are from Euromonitor, and they are published in a report by ING, the bank, and they're predicting that both the dairy alternative and the meat alternative market will continue to grow in the coming years, and that the growth will even accelerate compared to what we've seen over the past 5 years or so. So let's have a closer look at the drivers behind this growth and what drives consumers really to try plant-based food. So this is a survey that was done 2 years ago by ProVeg. They interviewed consumers in 9 countries to understand what was driving them to try plant-based food. And the first comment that I want to highlight, and it's also something that we hear from our members, it's that what is driving the growth growth of the plant-based sector is not that there are more vegans, it's actually people who are calling themselves flexitarians, so they are not adopting a fully vegan diet, not even a fully vegetarian diet, but they're reducing their consumption of animal products and looking for options to integrate in their diets to reduce the share of animal products and replace it with other sources of protein or other type of products. So we're really seeing that this growth is not, that I showed in the previous slide, it's not correlated to an increase in the number of vegans in consumers, but really about flexitarian incorporating more of these products in their diets. But then what are the drivers for the different groups? I highlighted here some of the responses that ProVeg got, and I want to highlight a few things there. And the first thing is that the product has to be tasty. It has to taste good, and that's really what we hear from our members. That's the number one priority, making sure that the product is good. And linked to the first comment we see here, that consumers try the products because they want to try something new. If a consumer tries a dairy or a meat alternative and the taste is really below expectations, they might abandon not only the brand, but the entire category. They might not try another alternative for a while because they've been really repelled. So there's really a strong incentive for manufacturers to develop products that taste really good to make sure that not only the consumers try them, but also stays and continues to incorporate more of these products in their diet. The second point, which is very important, and it's also the second point on this slide, is that the products have to be healthy and nutritious. And with that, we mean both low in the negative nutrients, not too much salt, not too much sugar, but also the positive nutrients. So protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, that's really important to respond to consumer demands. And the trust in the brand that you can see here, I would highlight that it's linked to the coherence of the offer. And for me, that's where we find the link and why there is a strong correlation between plant-based and organic, because consumers who are trying or incorporating more plant-based foods for health or environmental or ethical reasons, these are the same drivers that you find for consumers to incorporate organic. So having a coherent policy, product offering that encompasses all these elements is important for the credibility of brands and to retain consumers. If we look from a policy standpoint and the drivers behind, the need to shift towards more plant-based diets, it's the willingness to move to a more sustainable food system. And indeed, there are 3 pillars that I want to highlight in relation to plant-based and why they are relevant in this context. So, of course, the environment is the first one. Producing plant-based food requires less resources in terms of land, in terms of water, and it emits less greenhouse gas emission than dairy products. It varies from one crop to another, but generally speaking, it is always lower than the animal alternative. The public health aspect is what I mentioned. Most of the products have per se good nutrient profiles because they are high in unsaturated fat, so the good fat, and they're low in saturated fat, the bad fat. So if they are not too high in sugar, not too high in salt, they have a very healthy profile and fit very well in a sustainable and healthy diet. And then the economic aspect of sustainability is very important. And I want to highlight that here, that it's not me saying it, but the European Commission in a report published in 2018, the protein strategy, where the Commission acknowledged that farmers have the highest profits when they're producing plant-based crops for food, as opposed to feed. And the reason for that is that food manufacturers have requirements in terms of the quality of the crops that lead them to pay a premium, non-GM premium, organic premium in certain cases. And that's the reason why it's a very good economic opportunity for farmers. And also in the new CAP, we hope that through the eco schemes available, there will be even more incentives for farmers to grow sustainable crop protein for food. But one thing that we want to highlight in terms of how we'll be able to get to a more sustainable food system is the shift in diets. As you can see on this slide, and that's a slide from the World Resource Institute, and they looked at the different steps, the different things we can do to reach our climate change targets. And there is no silver bullet. That's really what this slide is showing. There is not a single thing that will get us there, but you can see that a shift in diets towards more sustainable eating habits, and that means more organic, more plant-based, fewer foods of animal origin, that has the biggest impact in terms of the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really something that, as an association, we're advocating for, facilitating a shift towards more sustainable diet. So we're glad that this was acknowledged. I mean, making the link with the Green Deal, which was the subject of this presentation, we're glad that this was acknowledged in the Farm to Fork strategy, where the need to move to a more plant-based diet was acknowledged, and this, is combined with the other target that is in the Farm to Fork strategy to increase organic production to a level of 25%. So you really have this dual target of more plant-based and more organic, and that's where where the opportunity for organic plant-based really is in terms of policy action. But a year later, where are we? We're still to see concrete initiatives to actually make that a reality. And we're a little bit lacking these concrete measures, either at EU level or at national level. I will highlight three points in particular very quickly. The first point was denominations. Those of you following policy for plant-based might have noticed that over the past year, we had to fight very hard just to retain the right to call our products plant-based alternative or veggie burgers. So there were attempts to really impose very strong marketing restrictions that would have been very detrimental to the development of the sector. Taxation is another point where we're seeing that things could be done to facilitate the transition towards organic and plant-based. The situation today is that in a number of member states, the VAT, in terms of VAT, plant-based products are not eligible for the reduced VAT because they're not considered essential food, whereas the dairy and meat products would benefit from the reduced rate. So we're really seeing a distortion there. And the third point that I want to spend a little bit more time on, because it's quite specific to the organic sector, it's the availability of organic ingredients. And we are extremely concerned at the moment as a sector, because we're seeing a trend with the implementation of the new organic regulation to reduce even more the type of ingredients that are allowed in organic processing. And I'm not talking here about additives and chemical type of products, but natural food ingredients that are used for their properties. For instance, when you use lemon juice to correct the acidity in a finished product, and when you're losing algae for the minerals and in particular the calcium content that it brings. So you're really using a natural agricultural product, but you're using it for its properties. And what we're seeing is that this is now being put into question for some of the from the ingredients that we're using. And if this trend continues, we would have a much more restricted number of ingredients we could use in plant-based products. And the problem will be that the organic option will be less tasty, less convenient, and less nutritionally relevant, which is even more important, less nutritious than the conventional products. And for us, that's a big concern, and it goes completely against the target of increasing at the same time plant-based food consumption and organic consumption, because if the products are not relevant nutritionally speaking, as we're seeing health being a key driver, we might actually put consumers away from these products, which have a lot to offer in terms of nutrition, environment, and sustainability for farmers. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Vinciane. I think that's a really interesting, very comprehensive presentation there. I have a few questions here. I also just like to remind there's a few questions that have come in from the audience for our previous panelists. You can still respond to these in the Q&A section if you would like to. And we have some for Vinciane, but we'll get to those in a minute. But first, let me pick up on a few things you just said there and ask you a little bit more about them. So you spoke a lot about the motivations of consumers of moving to more plant-based food. I'm wondering, how do you see the shift of motivations in consumers? Has this been changing over time, and kind of like looking forward to the future, you know, how do you see the main motivations maybe shifting and changing, and how can the industry respond to this changing kind of shift?
Yeah, I will mention two things in particular. First, the demographic. So we're really seeing that the younger consumers are really adopting the products from early on. I'm going to exaggerate to make the point, but 25 years ago, it was mostly elderly women that would consume soy foods because of hot flushes. I mean, I'm really exaggerating to make the point. This is a very different picture in terms of consumers today. And we're really seeing the younger generation integrating the products without, you know, for them, it's even a no-brainer. It's something very, very natural to do. So we will see that this will, I mean, that's the reason why the trend is long lasting, because they will stay on as consumers in the longer term. The second thing is that some of the sustainability drivers that I mentioned, so environmental impact, animal welfare, ethical reasons, this is also increasingly a factor for consumer decision. And this has been accelerated with COVID. We've really seen that over the last year. So as you could see on the chart that I showed, I mean, the trend was already upwards, but this has been accelerated with COVID. And it's a combination of health reasons, sustainability reasons that brought more consumers towards plant-based food during the lockdowns. And this is stabilizing at this level. So it's not that it was just a moment and then people went back. It's a trend that is there to stay.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you think this kind of momentum is actually something in the future that will be sustained. So industry could kind of bet on that in the future. And also, I'm wondering another motivation I don't think you mentioned. I'm wondering, are consumers also concerned? How concerned are consumers with origin and kind of provenance? Things like if it was produced in the EU labels, also at the regional level, it's something we discuss a lot in terms of food products in EU policy. I'm wondering if that's factors into motivations.
It is a motivation. I would say in terms of, I mean, it's not a key driver. It's for certain consumers, but it is a motivation. And I would take the example of soybeans. For instance, I mean, 100% of the soybeans used by our members to produce organic food are from the EU. So it's not coming from outside of the EU. The reason for that, one of the reasons for that, is to guarantee non-GM, which is a very important point in soy. So for a certain type of crops, it will be a combination of factors to, I mean, where the origin would be the guarantee of the quality on other aspects. So no deforestation, no GMOs, pesticides use, being everything done by the standards. So yeah.
Interesting. I'll take now a question from the audience. So we have a question here from Tatiana, who asked a question earlier. She'd like to know if the European Plant-Based Food Association is also considering working with alongside livestock and dairy farmers so that they can shift to more plant-based farming and, you know, growing ingredients for plant-based companies. Is that something that you are working on or considering?
Not at EU level. but it's something that is happening at national level. Our members are involved in programs, most often local programs, to bring farmers along the journey to grow more plant-based. Again, using the example of soy, because there's been a lot of investment that went in developing the soy, the European soy supply chain a couple of years ago, including in organic, because there wasn't soy being produced in the EU. So our members locally invested financially, of course. So we're talking about long-term contracts to make sure that farmers can make the transition while having the economic certainty, but also having the technical knowledge. So it's working with organizations on the ground, farmers organization, to make sure that they are accompanied in their transition. So this is happening, but more at local level, directly with the farmers than something coming from the top down.
Right. Okay, and I've got one last question here for you. I know you spoke about this idea of naming things. So how you name things has a big impact on maybe how people interact, how people understand. I know we've been talking so much about I know the number off the top of my head. Amendment 171, the dairy
exactly.
defense. And so we have a question here from Freya Schultz. She would like you to maybe expand a little bit more on this idea of denominations, and also maybe point her to some resources where she can find out a little bit more about this. So how important really is this denomination issue? Maybe you can expand on that for Freya.
I don't see the exact question, so I hope I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll put more elements in writing afterwards. Okay. Because we often get the question, why do you care so much? Because you are not milk. So, that's your value proposition. You're saying that you're not this. So why do you want to refer to the product you say you're not? Because we are not milk in that sense. This being said, we really see that, again, back to the point that we're still about 6% of the reference market. Consumers have known how to use milk and dairy products for a very long time. So when they see a plant-based products, they need to understand very quickly, how can I use it? When is the moment of consumption? Can I use it in my coffee? Can I use it to cook pancakes or do a bechamel? So the ability to refer to the reference product that they know makes it very easy for consumers. And consumers, we've seen it via research that was done not by us, but by BEUC. Consumers are not confused. They know very well that these products are not dairy products, but it gives them a clue to understand how to incorporate it in their diet, which is very important as we still have a lot of consumers who do not know the products.
Absolutely. Do I put this in my tea? Do I drink this separately? Yeah, I see definitely what you're saying there. There's a couple of other questions, but we are out of time for them. So perhaps you could answer if you would like to.
Very happy to.
In the Q&A function for our audience. But so with that, we will bring the conference or start